Due to increased internet censorship, truth is under attack like never before. And the truth about the controlled demolitions of the World Trade Center towers on September 11th is just as important as it ever was. To stay updated on our work, make sure you visit ae911truth.org and subscribe to our email list. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can receive alerts when our videos are posted. No algorithm can silence the facts. By subscribing directly to us, you make it impossible for the censors to stand between you and the information you need to know. Visit ae911truth.org right now and stay connected.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and the last time that we did a show, we had a whole panel up to talk about various things, RFK Jr. being confronted about 9/11 and such, and among those panelists was our Director of Marketing, Jeff Long, and very casually, when I brought him on, I made this comment about how he used to work for the government, putting out propaganda, doing that work on behalf of that side. And it occurred to me that that's kind of a big story. And we covered it one time back when the show was in its audio days, back when we sounded like I was recording on a Panasonic recorder from the 70s or something. We got a video show now. So why not bring Jeff on to talk more about this, find out how it works on the other side, and open this up into a bigger discussion about Operation Mockingbird, because frankly, this is the main reason that we have so much trouble getting our message out. We have people sometimes, if we veer off of controlled demolition for a bit, we'll say, what does this have to do with Building 7 and the Twin Towers and the controlled demolition evidence? Well, it has everything to do with the fact that this evidence proves these buildings were brought down in controlled demolitions, but it's like pulling teeth to try to get the media to cover it. I think this is the reason why. So let's go ahead and bring our guest in. Jeff Long is the Director of Marketing for AE 9/11 Truth. He makes a lot of the great graphics that you see associated with our content. He also does a number of other things here. I don't know what we'd do without him. He used to put out propaganda for the U.S. government, like I said. And he's got a very interesting story to share about this. So let's go ahead and bring him on in. Jeff, thank you so much for coming back this week to share your story with our audience. Before we get into your story, you know, I've got it up on the screen behind me, and I'm really making an art out of making these graphics behind me. I kind of feel like I'm designing covers for albums from like the 80s or 90s or whatever. But remind our audience what Operation Mockingbird is. You know, they may hear you talk about it, but they may not know what it's all about.
Well, it's funny if you actually go to Wikipedia and look at the explanation there, where they break it down quite a bit. They're still saying that it's alleged, even though we had the church committee hearings where they exposed it during that time. And, you know, this massive tome right here, I don't know if everybody can see it, CIA in the Media, this was published in 77, but the hearings went on 75, maybe 76, and CIA was put on the spot. And that's sort of, I think, where they threw one of their, threw one of the directors under the bus at that point, because the way that came out, people don't understand that even though they claimed that it might have come out in 63, based off of the family jewels that came out, and I think in 73, some leaked documents, but that's probably the first place online where you could actually see where it's mentioned. But the CIA was formed in 1947 at the same time that they created the Air Force, breaking it out of the U.S. Army Air Corps. So through that act, creating supposed to be the centralized intelligence hub just to push stuff around, it just became its own behemoth. And it's my contention at this point that, well, for one, it's really not part of the U.S. government the same way other agencies do. You don't elect any of these people. They came out of the OSS out of World War II, an intelligence agency, and a lot of Hollywood type people that were used during that time. People don't realize that someone like Julia Childs was an OSS officer, the precursor to the CIA, and there are several others that transitioned over. But all the media outlets, from these people out of Yale and the Skull and Bone Society, the people who created all these wealthy families, it's basically this unelected, centralized intelligence gathering and assassination group that the wealthiest families are using as their own private security and intelligence gathering, stuff like that. Because we can see how the CIA is basically running the show from behind the scenes, basically unaccountable for anything, even though we have intelligence oversight committees. Soon as you do something wrong, somebody's going to pull out a file, a dossier on you, and just go, this is how you're going to change your attitude and what you're talking about. But still, according to the CIA, it's still an alleged operation. And even when I was doing this during the Cold War, I was a Air Force intelligence non-commissioned officer, and I did this from when I was 18 to 24. So when I got to Germany, I was working in this joint intelligence facility, had all the alphabet agencies in there, had all 4 branches of military intel, and this was all targeting Soviet Union and East Germany at that time. And our theater was all the Warsaw Pact, all of Western Europe, Middle East, and mostly Northern Africa. So those are our theater of operations for everything we were doing as far as intelligence gathering and spying and all the regular cloak and dagger kind of stuff, as well as most of the open source intelligence. So it's not like what I was doing the code words were not, Operation Mockingbird for something I was doing. CI would come to my office because I'm a graphic designer by trade. I was trained by the Air Force in Denver at the school where they trained all 4 branches of military intel. And just like any other organization, they need a marketing department to put out their information. This one specifically is just tailored to intelligence work. So somehow I got recruited out of basic training. My drill instructors saw it. That they kept taking me to, I kept being sent all across the base to different times, being pulled out of classes, because Air Force basic training is a lot different than all the other branches. It's more like college courses. And I'd get pulled out, take these weird psychological exams, and be sent back to my unit to go back into the daily grind. But somebody had eyes on me. My drill instructors told me and said I was selected for something. They didn't know what it was, but they were going to leave me alone. And by the time I got to Denver out of basic training, getting my orders with about 450 other Air Force and other branches too, for the different courses, the classes and the schools everybody's going to. I think 4 or 5 of us got our orders, these large packets for our next duty stations. I already knew where I was going to be stationed, where I was going to be working. I had to fill out my FBI background information paperwork so they could do their investigation for my security clearance. So even before I even started school, I knew where I was going and what it was I was supposed to be doing for the most part. But it wasn't until I actually got there that I got to see more of the machinations from behind the screen and the fence, everything else, and what you're alluding to and what some people pick up on, everybody's always trying to say that I worked for the CIA. Never did. They were a client at a joint intelligence facility, just as the NSA was, National Reconnaissance Office, Defense Intelligence Agency, all the 16 or so at the time. And they came to my office, the graphic design shop. I think there were 6 of us at the time. I was there for 6 years, and they came, and we do up work orders for whatever intelligence product that we needed. And being a reconnaissance technical organization, we're dealing with the CIA spy satellites and National Reconnaissance Office, NSA projects, Defense Intelligence Agency type of projects, and they're kind of an amalgamation of CIA and military. But everybody had something that they wanted to get across in some kind of intelligence briefing. So you'd have different agencies compete, come to my office, need some intelligence briefing materials made so they could take it back to Langley, or they're taking it to the White House or the Pentagon for whatever it was they were doing there. It was usually a lot of the same product. I would just take off the CIA's emblem off the slide set and then put in the NSA and then or Navy intelligence and like, here you guys go, you know, and then they'd fly back to the States and do whatever it was that they were doing. But they were all clients. I was Air Force intelligence working in a joint intelligence facility, Air Force installation with all 4 branches and all the creepy alphabets. And so that's where that kind of confusion comes up. But that's where I started doing all this stuff for them. It wasn't listed, like, because every program has a classified project and code word and code name to it. It wasn't called Project Mockingbird. It wasn't like I got the classified folder with the stuff I had to work on and it said Operation Mockingbird. But it was, hey, we need to put this stuff together because they were using it in media all around the world, mostly targeting Europe. But I'd see my stuff, the stuff that I would make for them, whether it was forged documents, false intelligence reports, ads and things, stuff that would wind up in different publications around the world. And I would see my stuff wind up in the Washington Post as something as factual, something, somebody who, whenever they say in the media that, you know, an unnamed source from the government came forth, that's just the Pentagon or some U.S. intelligence or some bureaucrat out of D.C. who's leaking something to the media that they want to get out. And that's why they're always talking about how it's some sort of unnamed source. Stuff doesn't come out unless they want it to. So that was the kind of stuff that I was doing, and I'd see it on when I saw something I had made for CIA that wound up on Ted Koppel's Nightline. And I think that, if I remember correctly, I think that had something to do with Iran at the time. So I was creating products for them as our shop and them being a client, things that would wind up in the U.S. media that people would take verbatim as being the truth. And, you know, after being there for so long and sitting in the NSA comms room in the morning drinking my coffee, I'd read CIA traffic and NSA traffic and what intelligence assets reporting on from the air attaches and people in the embassies going back and forth to headquarters, depending on whether it's Fort Meade in Maryland or Langley in Virginia, or stuff to the Pentagon. And I got to see what was going to be in the news, what was going to be covered up, what they were going to be putting out as truthful disinformation, or something that I was going to wind up working on later that week. So that's sort of the gist of it, if that makes sense, even though that's just kind of long-winded.
Well, I mean, so you were one of the troublemakers. You were one of the people that we talk about without knowing who they are. Obviously, this was, I think, back in the 80s that you were involved with this, and you talked about the church committee in the very beginning and how this kind of came out during those hearings. Operation Mockingbird. And what you have in this particular case is you have CIA embedded with the media, or you have people in the media on CIA payroll working hand in hand to put out disinformation, misinformation, whatever they need to push the policy they want, the agenda they're looking for. Now, there's a video off the internet. It's about 3 minutes. I just want to share it with our audience because, Jeff, for some reason, it's getting harder and harder to find these factual information on YouTube. So as a public service, I got to share it here on Freefall. It's usually tucked in some dark corner of YouTube untouched for the last 5 years. So let's just take a look at some of the revelations that came out in the church committee about this very operation.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them. We have quite a lot of detailed information, and we will evaluate it, and we will include any evidence of wrongdoing or any evidence of impropriety in our final report and make recommendations.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
Senator, do you think that you named the news organizations in your final report?
That remains to be decided. I think it was entirely in order for our correspondents at that time to make use of CIA agent chiefs of station and other members of the executive staff of CIA as sources of information which were useful in their assessments of world conditions.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
I don't think they care about disfavor by the public anymore. As long as they can keep the airwaves controlled, I mean, they just, with reckless abandon, especially after September 11th, laying on the propaganda thick, and they're all too happy to have these spooks come out on these news shows and prattle off whatever propaganda they need to keep the agenda going forward. I remember calling into C-SPAN and calling what their every Sunday session that they would have. It called the weekly war pep rally. It would be like a new spook every week. These people don't like it when you talk back to them either. So that gives you an essence of what Operation Mockingbird was all about. I believe it's still occurring. Again, CIA working hand in hand with the media. not what we're told a free society is all about. You notice in there, too, that they're talking about stories planted overseas that come home to the United States. This reminds me of, I think it was called Echelon. It was like a spying system where the UK and the US had it. So they can't spy on their own people, but they can spy on people from foreign countries. So the UK spies on Americans, the Americans spy on the UK people, and then they can just trade the information with each other. So it's like, we didn't spy on our own people. The British gave it to us.
Yeah, now it's part of.
Go ahead.
That's right. It's like now it's part of. I mean, you just look at the Five Eyes program. For the NATO-esque group of our governments that are trading this information back and forth. The U.S., UK, New Zealand, Australia. I'm blanking on the other, but Echelon was what they're actually using, and this reminds me of when I first got there, when the NSA came to give me their first work order to work on something, create some crap for them. I had no idea who they were, because during that time in the 80s. They were still one of the most secretive organizations. I mean, they used to always joke about it's like NSA stood for no such agency. And there were a couple books that talked about it, and some people around DC would, but for the most part, American public had no idea. And this poor kid coming out of the orange groves of Florida definitely had no clue. And I joined the Air Force at the time just for GI Bill, because I'm not a militaristic type person. Been a pacifist my entire life, but being a poor kid growing up, having the GI Bill to be able to go to school after finishing that stuff up was like my one opportunity, it seemed. I also had a 3.9 GPA during that time in high school, but my guidance counselors never told me that I was eligible for any kind of scholarships or anything. So I signed up, delayed enlistment in the Air Force my junior year in high school, with my mom, who was a deputy sheriff at the time, having to sign the documentation so I could actually join the military at that point. But I just remember when working with the NSA and figuring out that they were our ears around the world and how big of an organization they were. It was, with the products that they came to me. When I first saw, Echelon and the Five Eyes network and how they were doing this, I noticed in the intelligence material that I was creating for them that it was all communications with Americans in it. And I said, we can't be doing this. It's like, I don't know how this is actually functioning. Of course, I'm 18, asking these questions, but the way that they described it said, look, what we do is we use our NSA facility in the UK at our base there, and we spy on the British for them. The British spy on Americans for us, and Australia, and everybody's doing this so that they could get around this unconstitutional spying and wiretapping of Americans, so that they could just trade information and just play this weird shell game. So I made a beef about it then, but being so young and fighting the Soviet Union at the time, that was the big scare, and nuclear Armageddon, and being the big baddies on the planet. So I just learned by being on the job certain aspects from being behind the fence, as it is. And I started seeing a lot of different things that didn't bode well, for fighting the bad guys. They're supposed to be the good guys. And then I was seeing all the crap that was going on from the inside. And, over that time, got a really bad taste in my mouth for what was going on. And then at the end of the Cold War, once we had no Soviet Union to spy on. They through the troop reduction that was going on between what Bush Sr. and Gorbachev had signed, bring down troop levels at that time. They were just purging everybody, and they just came to the offices and gave us all pink slips saying that nobody for you guys to spy on anymore. So everybody's got to leave. Didn't know you could get laid off from the military at that time, but everybody was leaving. I was trying to maybe transition into a position with the Thunderbirds at the time, because they were looking for somebody with my skill set to travel around the world with them to do their marketing, and I was in competition for that. But because I turned down some of these annoying Air Force officers who were hand in hand with the CIA personnel that we're working with, they were trying to get me to transition over and go civilian with the agency. And at that point, I wanted nothing to do with them, because I was like, I'm either going to try to do this thing with the Thunderbirds, and they're like, well, we killed that package competition for you, so that's not going to happen. So you can work with us and keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, no, thanks. I don't agree with what you guys do. And, you put women and children in harm's way to do what it is that you're doing. I mean, it's different than grown adults agreeing to this war game scenario, playing good guys and bad guys. You sign up for it as an adult, but once you start involving women and children who have no idea that they're involved in a certain country in the middle of a coup and something's going on, and people being assassinated, kidnapped, CIA blowing up railway stations and trying to blame it on different factions. When you start looking at Operation Gladio, then you can see how that stuff ties in. But at the end, I've refused their offer, and of course, at the end, they decided that they could throw me into one of their black site prisons in Frankfurt at the time for the last 2 years of my Air Force enlistment before I out processed, just for refusing to continue on and work with them. I finally had to get a congressman involved so you could put me up above the radar so that they would leave me alone at that point. But and that also tails in after early on working with a CIA team, trying to extricate some hostages out of Lebanon at the time. They came over, and they uncovered a shadow CIA team working in Wiesbaden where we were, and so that whole thing transpired into the CIA team bombing the other CIA team because they're going back to report on it. So I was learning pretty quick that these people eat their own, and luckily somebody pulled me off Pan Am 103 at the last minute because I was being forced to go back to the States for mandatory vacation or whatever for like a week or two. But the team I was working with was on that flight. This other CI team is the one who put the bomb on there, that they got Gaddafi to agree that his intelligence officers did it. But, because he was one of our assets and he was starting to go rogue, and they couldn't have that. So they got him to take the blame. So it's funny how some of these people out there in the 9/11 research world, we know that a lot of them are operatives and they're just trying to muddy the waters. But as long as you and I have been working together, at least since 2013, I let everybody know from the get-go my background. We've done a lot of these shows. Most of it was more radio based at the time, but I've never hid that aspect about my background, because that's how I got here. Looking into 9/11.
Well, let me just jump in for a second, because I want to be very clear with the Pan Am thing. That you didn't know this plane was going to blow up. Somebody came up to you and handed you another ticket, and I think your family even thought you were on that flight and that you had died, and so it was right. So you didn't have any clue that this plane was going to blow up. He wasn't part of a team that put a bomb on it or anything like that. So I just want to clarify that for our audience. regarding the last part of what you just said, I know this. Look, there is an organized effort against this crew because it's effective and they're doing everything they can to try to smear AE 9/11 Truth, the individuals here grasping at anything. And a few weeks ago, I saw somebody on Facebook saying, "You have a CIA agent working for you." And I mean, in all likelihood, this guy is probably working for some nefarious. I can't imagine the CIA hiring this guy. Just look at him. But, but you know, some nefarious thing going on there because these people have been outed for spreading lies and stuff like this. But Jeff has been completely open about all of this. Now, Jeff makes our graphics. He helps us with web work and formatting our articles and such. Anybody's got a problem with the overall theme of the content, you talk to me right here. And if you think I'm one of them, I don't know what to say. But, you know, you're going to get that criticism, you know, from no matter what you do. And, you know, if somebody has actually had this experience, can bring this perspective from the inside and is now doing this to try to get the truth out, applying their talents to it, that is a good thing. And they should absolutely be listened to. Any comments?
Well, you and I have dealt with this for, well, you know, the last decade easily. I dealt with this when I was in the DC 9/11 group, when I was working in DC for that decade prior to going to the West Coast. Excuse me. But we used to get agents in there all the time, people coming in trying to disrupt, sow dissent. You start seeing the patterns. Some friends and I outed a few agents where they're acting a certain way that were into the group early on, but you know, they had all the telltale signs. You know, if you watch them over a period of time, it was easy to figure out with those kind of people. But you know, it's such a contentious topic. I mean, when you've got, I mean, I always classify this 9/11 operation as a televised snuff film that they showed the world, killing 3,000 people on live TV, part of their occult ritual and the stuff that they're actually doing. So they have no problem doing anything, doing the worst things against people and humanity. So you get those people that start coming into the groups. It's when we're trying to expose what they did to Americans and everybody else that was on the towers during that time, including one of my family members, that apart from like the Kennedy assassination, you know, getting up to the point of 9/11, you know, being so brazen. They're doing everything possible to keep that contained, and we've done so much good work. A lot of 9/11 researchers, whether it's what we all did with the tower research, the stuff that Shanksville always gets kind of overlooked because they memorialized it. So once you do that, you can't even question anything. You know, you look at what they did around the towers and putting up the museum. Again, you can't question it because that's un-American. And God forbid you talk about anything at the Pentagon. And that's where most of the trolls come from, because that's like one of the key linchpins to this whole thing. But they're always going to be on the attack. And we can see they're useful idiots at the low level doing what they're doing. You only need a couple high-level intelligence assets running a group. I mean, we can see that's how the CIA did with their creation of Al-Qaeda. Those people at the bottom of the food chain running around, the foot soldiers, have no idea that they're being run from Langley. So it's just stuff that we're going to run into all the time. We're going to have these detractors, but at the end of the day, you just got to keep doing the work to try to expose what's actually going on. And can't keep my mouth shut because I see some horrible things going on. I mean, that's why you and I are doing this, and a bunch of other people that we work with. They've been doing it for so long. It's you know, it's the right thing to do. You just can't shut up. You see a crime going on. You know, it's I don't think you would be that way either. We've got this weird mindset now that when people see crime going on the street, instead of helping or calling 911 or doing anything to help, everybody pulls out their phone so that they can record it, put it up as a YouTube short or TikTok, Instagram, and get their little bit of fame from it. We've gotten to that space in our life to where we're walking around with these black monoliths from 2001: Space Odyssey, and it's just controlling everything. We've got these. I remember doing an article for the Rock Creek Free Press when I was in DC about surveillance, and if you're doing any kind of activism, you can tell your phone is listening to you by how it would react to speakers in your room. And this is the old flip phones from that time. And I just remember saying that at the end of the day, if you don't want anybody to hear your conversation and you're trying to discuss something with somebody, you leave the phone somewhere else and you go off where there's none of this technology and have your conversation. So now we just walk around with these small NSA pocket size supercomputers that just do everything. And people just become complacent to it. We've been trained for our own surveillance.
Well, first, let me just say regarding the agent stuff or whatever, and I can only waste so much brain power on worrying about that stuff. So what I do is just stick to a policy. If someone's there to cause trouble, they're going to have to flip the switch at some point, which means they're going to have to start acting bad. The moment I start seeing bad behavior and dishonesty and, just overall bad stuff, just flick them off. And I just stick to that principle. It makes people mad. But it's very effective.
You've got your own group that likes to go on the attack for you. There's certain people like to attack me, people from back in DC at the time, the agent stuff that come in. And we've had to purge some of the agents the obvious ones that we've seen around AE, did the same thing when I was in DC 9/11. You just show who they are, and then they typically just kind of fade away, as most criminals do once their cover's blown.
Well, they're never completely gone. It's sort of like Batman. It's like the Joker falls into the ocean, and you think he's gone, and then he comes back like 20 issues later or whatever. They're always kind of coming back, But whatever, we take it in stride here. I say someone's got a problem with me, just spell my last name right. They always leave that E off the end, and it drives me nuts. I don't know why it's there, but it always has been. Just include it. And if you're quoting me, make sure you spell it right, because I don't want there to be any doubt about who said it. Yeah. So I want to play this and get back to the Mockingbird media, because people are going to say, Jeff, oh my God, the CIA can't be embedded in every single media institution. I mean, there's so many of them. Look, I got a Roku. Just got it for Christmas. And there's so many channels. Look, you got Hulu, you got Netflix, but even before that, you had ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and then you got all these local newses. What are they controlling? All of these people. Now, I want to show everybody, and I don't know how to put graphics up with this. I know only how to do it as a video, but I think I can still talk over it. All right, 6 companies right here. These are just the TV networks. Look at all of the networks that they own. Most of what you watch, listen to, read in this country is owned by these 6 companies who have a vested interest in keeping the status quo going. Certainly talking about mass murder and hidden evidence of controlled demolition is not going to be on their agenda. But I want to play this for our audience. Now, in some of the earlier parts of this video, you're going to hear laughing over it, because these were actually featured on Conan O'Brien, when he's doing a huge service to the people of America by covering this. The last one is from a viral video. You can see I kind of spliced them all together. But these are all local news stations. And actually, I'm just going to let the video do the talking for me. This is going to be about 2 minutes.
And welcome back to the show. I scream, you scream. You know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. Well, I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
Who are you really shopping for this holiday season? It's okay, you can admit it, if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Well, it's okay. You can admit it if you have bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it. You've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Man, do they love that word democracy. God, I mean, it's not a republic, it's a democracy. That guy who doesn't know anything about the issues is going to have as much say as you, and that's just a form of selecting your representatives. What made America great was the fact that we had a set of laws that even if you had an angry mob that wants to go take your house and replace it with, an Orange Julius or something, they can't do that because you have property rights and people have rights and all that stuff. But they love that word democracy because it sounds exciting. It sounds good. It sounds like pure Snow White goodness there. So anyway, your reaction to that clip?
Well, I'm glad that that somebody early on compiled that just to show everybody around the world, not just the American people. But I just don't understand how people don't realize that these news personnel, they're not journalists. They're just repeaters. They're basically actors reading a teleprompter. That's all they do. Surprised they don't have their own SAG card for it. But, it's just like and then they're just the low level types that interview the higher level agency personnel that's from that infographic that I sent you that's in our Operation Mockingbird article.
Can we bring that up?
Sure. And then you can see it, like what the church committee hearings was showing was asking, are these people embedded in our news media? And here we are several decades later, where they're paid pundits that are on these networks now. Yeah, you can see all the NSA directors, CIA directors, FBI personnel, Homeland Security. Yeah, and I'm sure some people are still unaware that Anderson Cooper, CIA, that they always forget that he's from one of the wealthiest founding families of this nation, the United States. Anderson Cooper Vanderbilt. He finally had to admit that he was in CIA when he was in college. So one of the wealthiest families on the planet. The son goes work for the CIA and he works in the mailroom at Langley. I don't think so. And now he's a CNN host himself, just one of the controlling gatekeepers for this whole thing. Like I said, there are so many of them that are out there that Hollywood's rife with them. I mean, the CIA and the Pentagon both have offices in LA. script approval. If you want to make a movie and you're going to use any military equipment, they're going to vet your script first to make sure it makes them look good. The same way with the CIA with Chase Brandon, who was running that office. Tommy Lee Jones' cousin, I think he is. But you don't get something made in Hollywood about the military or the CIA without them making sure that it's going to paint the best patriotic light for them, so that they can keep the narrative going, and they get free use of all that equipment.
Let me just say too, it's like a carrot and a stick thing, because it's incredibly expensive to film a movie. Like with all those Apache helicopters, like nobody could afford one practically. I mean, they're not going to afford 10 for a scene or whatever, and all these weapons and stuff. So getting the military to help you and, loan you stuff, is good for your movie, but there's a price to be paid. They got to approve your script. So, most people will just kind of go along. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to put that in there, because people say, oh, I saw a movie about the military that was critical. They may have done it without getting the military help, but that military help is a big incentive.
Yeah. Well, it's, you'd have to ask, it's like, why does DHS, Homeland Security, and the CDC, where are they doing script approval for Law and Order? It's like that, that one doesn't even make sense from the outside, but there's just so much of this stuff going on. It's just everywhere. I mean, Chris Carter talked about it when he was doing the X-Files. They had people showing up on set and like, hey, why don't you do this, talk about this, and they were talking about how they had people that they would contact in Hollywood who weren't an actual CIA agent or anything like that, operative, but they were paid assets, and like, hey, you're an influential person, we're going to get you into this party here, and just tell us what you hear from all the people. And these are high end,
and the question that should be getting asked is, why is the darn government involved in making movies and TV? This isn't their business. This is not what they're paid for. This is what
that's propaganda.
Of course. I mean, that's obviously what the rhetorical question leads you to. I want to show something too, because earlier you said that these are basically actors pretending to be reporters. Now, I am not saying that, like, for instance, Anderson Cooper isn't really named Anderson Cooper, and that he hasn't had that identity his entire life. But you look at the presentation that they give, and it is really more about selling the story, selling the public about whatever mood they're trying to portray. And so from that clip that I played with all of those people talking about how people like you and me are dangerous to our democracy, I just want to show you this. There is a lady. Look at the lady that I circled, and I just took 4 stills from this segment, and look at the disappointed look on her face as she watches you from that TV screen. She is disappointed in you. You're being irresponsible with social media and the internet. That's what they're trying to convey to the audience. Like, she's got nothing to say here. The guy is doing all the talking, but they want her to stand there and look somber, like she's the teacher that left the room for a few minutes, and now there's a paper fight, and a kid's got a pencil in his eye and has to go to the nurse. Look at this. Look at this lady right there. She is so disappointed in you. How dare you watch 9/11 Free Fall? How dare you follow AE 9/11 Truth? Look what you're doing to our democracy. So that is acting. Like, does that lady really care? Really? When some guy, I mean, you can see everybody is reading this. It's not like they got together, the 3 of them, and decided this was a real problem. Obviously, it's being handed to all these networks. So her job is just to look sad and disappointed. So that's what we're talking about when these people are actors. I mean, maybe they didn't go to acting school. Maybe they did. I don't know.
Well, they all kind of talk the same, but they get, they get that weird TV anchor affectation. So they're obviously getting the same kind of training there. But and that's not what I mean, is that these people are fake people portraying somebody. These are just useful dupes sitting there reading. These people don't realize they're getting agency talking points. They're just sitting there. They show up, they read what's on the screen, and and then the information gets out there. And if people are watching that, like that clip, you could see that it was, local. It's like ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, all this stuff. We got this whole left-right paradigm going on. It's left versus right, and it's always, Super Bowl. It's this team going against this team, and it's like it's a uniparty, and it's just all the same garbage that's just being filtered through there. And when you can see the difference in the types of actors, you've got somebody like Aaron Brown, his first day at CNN, when he's talking about the collapse of Building 7, he turns around, he's a New Yorker, and then you can hear it. And I can't remember, he got the script 45 minutes, or maybe it was an hour and 45 minutes ahead of time. And he turns around and you can hear, he's like, oh, well, no, Solomon Brothers building's still there. You can hear his confusion because he's being told in his ear that the building has collapsed. But then you see somebody like Jane Stanley, who, more of a useful idiot, and what she went through reporting it 20 minutes ahead of time on BBC. But these people, they obviously got the script a little too early and then started talking about it. It's I mean, with the confusion that day, you can see how certain mistakes and things were made. And that's how we're able to, as 9/11 researchers from all across from Shanksville, Pentagon to the towers, to the operatives coming across, being shuttled through Riyadh, and that became our pilots and stuff like that through these CIA programs. All this research that everybody has done, it's all there, and a lot of stuff to wade through, but through time and effort, people can figure this stuff out. And so there were so many different operations going on. I mean, it's amazing that they were able to pull it off for what they did, but we can expose certain things, but still, it's like 2 decades in, and people become complacent. They're moving on to the next thing. There are so many things that happened since then, but because we haven't corrected that aspect of it, because we haven't corrected what happened to Kennedy and to RFK and to Martin Luther King, all these other operations. They're just people embedded in different places, and they don't know where the information is coming from. And like, for the average person, you just show up to work and you've got a certain thing to do. You don't know who's telling you this kind of stuff and where it's coming from. You're just there your job is to push the buttons, do the levers, talk in front of the camera, be that repeater journalist.
Yeah, and the thing is, the problem with something like 9/11 or whatever the next big event is going to be is that it's not like a movie. It's not like the evidence proving inside job, controlled demolition, whatever it is, comes out the next day, and the whole story can be fit into a 2-hour time frame. I mean, it takes time, especially when you're having no cooperation from your government. Your media is just trying to shove an official story down your throat. It takes time, first for the chosen ones, and I mean, the chosen ones are based off of the people themselves, whether they want to get involved. But in our case, the architects and engineers to take an interest in this and do the research and be able to make a case, and then for new evidence to come out, and then for there to be kind of like a movement to develop around it. That can take a very long time. So the problem is that life ticks on. People get complacent. Most people don't do anything they'd rather not do unless they're afraid of something else, right? And in the case of 9/11, we were told, hey, we're going after the terrorists overseas. You're going to be safe now as long as you let us continue to do this. And people went on watching Super Bowl, WrestleMania, whatever. And there was a minority of people that continued up this fight. I don't know what you do about that other than have that iron will to keep on hammering at this. I want to show a quick quote here. Malcolm X: the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses. Folks, I think that's why they call it programming. Now, I'm not going to, put out some conspiracy that, they literally called it programming because of that. But man, is that ironic, because they are programming you. They're telling you what to think. And even the TV shows, the sitcoms and stuff, that people subconsciously, even though intellectually, the people on TV, the characters aren't real. When you get to watching a show every single week, like let's say the Friends back in the 90s, you begin to feel like you know them, that they're actually your friends. And there's like a certain psychological satisfaction you get from that. But at the end of the day, you got to remember, the friends aren't your friends. The friends aren't real. All right. I saw this. There's a YouTube. Well, it was on BBC, I think, but it's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's called How TV Ruined Your Life. After you're done watching 9/11 Freefall, go find that. They're about, I think, 30 to 40-minute episodes. There's one snarky remark about 9/11 conspiracy theories in that. If you can forgive that, the rest of it is really good and very insightful and makes a really good argument for why you should watch as little TV as possible. And people can say, well, look, you know, who cares? Who cares? I mean, I think for myself, and we can still get behind our elected representatives. We can still do our actions and have an impact on this country. If you want to stick with me for a 2.5-minute clip, Jeff, I want to share this. It's from a film called Spin. This is where the guy had satellite dishes and he could pick up the footage of things from when the normal networks like CNN and such would go to commercial break. Hard to find now. It used to be very easy to find like 10 years ago. So that's why there's Spanish subtitles on this, because this is all I could locate. I had to make an edit to be able to upload it to here on the service we're using, but you can watch it. But this is about Larry Agron, who ran for president in 1992.
Before Clinton was shooed into office, he had to compete against a host of other Democratic candidates. The media focused on 4 of these candidates, but Larry Agron was a 5th candidate the press did not report on.
There's no makeup here?
During the 1992 U.S. Conference of Mayors, the New York Times reported that, quote, dozens of mayors seem to agree on one thing. The single candidate who truly understands urban needs is Larry Agron, unquote.
They promised to bring this stuff over.
None of the networks mentioned Agron's presence at the convention.
How about if I run over that Super Saver?
One of Agron's staff had to run over to the Super Saver and buy some makeup because the network had broken its promise to provide it. This was typical of the media's treatment of Agron. When he appeared at this Democratic candidates forum, this Associated Press photo simply cropped Agron out of the frame. During the New Hampshire primary, the TV news reported the polling numbers of the top 5 Democratic candidates: Brown, Clinton, Harkin, Kerry, and Tsongas. When Agron moved into a 3-way tie with Harkin and Brown with 2% of the vote, most of the TV news didn't mention Agron. The day Bill Clinton captured what may have been the most valuable airtime of the entire election, as he spoke to 50 million viewers about his alleged affair, was the same day that a poll showed Agron's support at 4%. He had passed Brown and was the 5th leading candidate. When ABC's Sunday Evening News reported this poll, they simply deleted Agron entirely by not reporting his candidacy. During the New Hampshire primary, Agron's only live commercial TV appearance was through this satellite feed to ABC's Nightline. But the Nightline program wasn't directly about the election. When Agron complained to news executives about his lack of coverage, he was told he had not earned the right to media exposure because he had not received enough media exposure. The Democratic Party refused to include Agron in the debates or speak to the networks on his behalf. Agron talked about his exclusion, saying, "I've challenged my own party for its continuing complicity in Cold War thinking, Cold War rhetoric, and Cold War budgets."
And he's talking about, I mean, when you're talking about Cold War, you're talking about military-industrial complex, challenging that. The guy is considered the best candidate for dealing with urban issues. If you remember, that was around the time, at least shortly after, of the Rodney King incident and riots and stuff. Urban issues were a big thing in 1992. And, you know, he wasn't given a fair shake. You can see exactly what's going on there. So this is not a politics show. I'm not telling you to vote for anybody or Democrat or Republican. I'm just saying this is what we are up against. So what a miracle it has been that AE 9/11 Truth has been able to accomplish what we have, that pretty much everybody, most people at this point in America have at least heard that there's a controversy surrounding the fall of the 3 towers in New York on that day, that we can continue to move forward and even get victories along the way, up against an establishment like this, up against that evil, cackling mockingbird that was created before many of us were even born here. Those are my thoughts. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
It's been going on forever since their inception. And, if people really want a great background on CIA corruption, they should look at the work of my old friend Lou Wolf back in DC, and Phil Agee, former CIA officer, who started what became a Covert Action Quarterly there in the end. I think they ran for about 27 years. And they were the bane of the existence for the CIA for the stuff that they were reporting on. I don't think people realize that most intelligence is open source. 80% of everything that we're looking at back in the day when I was doing it is open source. What you'd see different media outlets reporting on, but also during that time, I think the CIA had owned outright, whether the companies knew or through all the paperwork and stuff, and who owned what, but they had control about 2,500 publications around the world at that time. So it's like they were just, and this is the 80s. I think even part of that came out during the church committee hearings. But having control of that much media, it's like that's how we're able to do what we do, because we do the deep dives, go down the rabbit hole, and we just start looking at information and trying to figure out what looks real, what's disinformation, what could be misinformation. What Covert Action Quarterly did was so important that I think it was the third not episode, but magazine that came out for Covert Action Quarterly. I think that's when they had the cover of a CIA check, because the CIA had paid for a subscription to it so they could see what they were actually talking about. And then when Lou published it on there, he got a call from them. They were pissed. Like, what are you doing? It's like, well, they showed the actual check coming from the CIA that they paid for subscription. And one thing that they did when it comes to copyright infringement, they were just making mass copies of everything that came out. And we had an intelligence library at our facility overseas, and where I worked. And whenever like a new publication would come out, like some book, some expose was getting close to it, they would pass it through the office, and whether a magazine or a book, newspaper article, you'd have to sign that you read it and that you were not going to talk about it, especially if any reporter came and asked you questions about it, no comment. But then it would be shelved in the library. And they had Lou's entire catalog of his magazine that I first got in touch with to actually see what was going on, what they were reporting on during the 80s. So they were paying attention to what he was reporting on and what he was able to expose, so they could, try to counter any of these leaks and things. But and of course, it was interesting when I finally got to DC and met Lou. He's one of the founders of the DC 9/11 group there, and I told him, it's like, it's funny meeting you in person now. It's like because used to, with the people I was working with, spying on you on a daily basis for the stuff that you were publishing and putting out. So not only were they putting out misinformation, but they were watching what everybody else was doing so that they could counter that and not publish it, make sure that kind of information didn't get out. It's a strange world in turn of events to get into 9/11 and tackle it with somebody that I knew from before. And of course, I've got one of Phil Agee's books up there, one of the ones that gave me the first deep looks into how creepy the agency is and how they eat their own. That you know, the CIA has a CIA inside. It's like a Russian doll. They're just the deeper you go, you get to the core of the creepier people, and they have no problem killing off their own people. I mean, we've seen that enough in the movies that they actually put out. But they're just one of the worst organizations on the planet, and it's fun bugging them online through social media, poking a little bit, but
well, there's got to be something touched in your head to want to be attracted to, you know, some of these deeper level things, or want to be able to live this kind of life and do some of this stuff that they do. But whatever, that is not my problem. My problem is this organization right here and our ability to keep on talking about the controlled demolition evidence and, of course, any issues related to that, which I think this is very heavily, because if you don't understand what you're up against, then you're never going to go anywhere. You're just going to be contained talking in your own little circles about this evidence of what happened on 9/11, but it won't get out to other people. So know what you're up against and figure out how to get around that. And we've done that time and time again. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your story with us, and for all the work you do here at AE 9/11 Truth. And I guess we'll have you again on Freefall in the future.
As things transpire, always.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe.